So today we'll be looking at generosity, at why and how it is important in our daily lives and in our practice. Coming up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. And if this is your first time watching these videos, welcome. And if you're interested in helping to try to promote a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled world, consider subscribing. So generosity. It's really the first thing the Buddha would teach people when he first met them as lay householders. It's the ground, the bedrock of the Buddha's teaching, and it's often one that's completely forgotten when we talk about Buddhist philosophy in general or Buddhist teaching in general. And I would say there's two different aspects to generosity which we'll look at in turn. One is the outward aspect of to whom one should give and why, and the other is the inward aspect of generosity, that is, why we should be in a place of giving to others. And there's a very interesting sutta called the Archery Sutta, where King Pasenadi asks the Buddha, to whom should one give? He wants a teaching to know, because obviously King Pasenadi is very wealthy, he wants to know who's the right person to give to. And the Buddha answers in a way that is actually very surprising at the time. He says, give to whoever you have confidence in, which basically in the context means give to whoever you want. And this is very surprising because one would expect a religious teacher, a spiritual teacher, a philosophical teacher like the Buddha to be saying, give to me, give to my sangha, give to my followers. Because, of course, these are people who are renunciants. They don't have any goods of their own. And so they survive by donation from wealthy people or from normal people. And so you would expect him to say, well, give to us. But he doesn't. He says, give to anybody. This actually relates to an earlier video that I made, which I'll put a link to up here on the screen somewhere. It relates to the Buddha's relation to the other schools of the day in ancient India. One of whom in particular were the Jains, but there were others as well, the Brahmins and so on, where the Buddha basically told people converting to his way of thinking from the Jain way of thinking that they should continue to give to their Jain teachers, because they had done it in the past and there was no reason not to do it now. Giving to anybody is good. In other words, he wasn't being exclusivist. But then King Pasenadi asks a different question. He asks, to whom should I give so that it would be of most benefit? And the Buddha notes, well, that is a different question. The Buddha says it would be of most benefit to give to the ethically virtuous and not to the immoral. And I think we can understand this pretty quickly. Obviously, if you're giving to somebody who is ethically virtuous, then they will do virtuous things with the donation you've given them. Either they will use it in good ways themselves, or they will give it to other people who need it, and so on. Whereas if you're giving to somebody who is immoral, then there is a chance that the gift could go to bad ends. Now, in the context of the sutta, it's pretty clear that what the Buddha is really arguing here is against giving only to Brahmins. Now, the Brahmins were the highest caste in ancient India, or at least they took themselves to be the highest caste. They were the caste of religious teachers, the people who knew the Vedas, the people who did the Vedic sacrifices on behalf of leaders and other people. And they were typically the people who it was believed were the best to donate to for that reason. But the Buddha gives a parable of the archers to King Pasenadi. He says, if you were looking for archers for your army, and they were Brahmins, or they were Kshatriyas, one of the other castes, or Shudras, or so on, Vaishyas, and they were bad archers, would you hire them? If they ran away in battle, would you hire them? And he says, no, of course not, I wouldn't hire them. And similarly, if they were even of lower caste, and they were very professional, good archers who were brave in battle and knew how to use their bows and arrows, would you hire them even if they were of low caste? And he says, of course I would. And so the Buddha says, in that same way, you should be giving to anybody who is ethically virtuous and not to those who aren't. That is to say, you shouldn't look to caste to tell you who are the most valuable to give to. You should instead look to ethics. And again, this is very important in the day. At the time, it was believed that you could gain the most benefit for yourself by donating to Brahmins, because Brahmins had a kind of ritual power to do you good. And the Buddha is basically saying that's not true. Instead, the real ritual power is ethical virtue. So in other words, when it comes to the question, the outward question of to whom one should give, or where one should give, the answer is give wherever you want, but if you want to do the most benefit, give to the most ethically virtuous. And now we turn to the more important inward question of why one should give. What is the psychological and spiritual reason for giving? And in a very interesting sutta, the Buddha has 8 reasons for giving. And this is pretty clearly a graduated list from worst reason to best reason. The first reason you give is, he says, first you insult them and then you give. So one assumes either you've insulted them and then you feel bad about it and so you give them a gift, or you do it at the same time in order to make clear that you're in a position that's quite above the people that you're insulting. And I think we can all understand that that's not a great reason to give to somebody, and it's not a great way to give to anybody. The second reason for giving is to give from fear. So in other words, you're trying to placate somebody, you're worried about them, you fear them, and so you give them a gift so that they won't hurt you. The third reason for giving is you give to somebody thinking, well, he gave something to me, so I'll just return the favor. And in this case, it's a quid pro quo, basically. You're doing something because they did something for you. And the fourth is you give to somebody thinking, he will give to me. Again, a quid pro quo. It's not really a gift, it's more of an exchange of goods that are of similar value. The fifth is to give to somebody thinking giving is good. So you have a sort of a conceptual understanding that it's good to give to somebody, so you do it. The sixth reason is that you think to yourself, I cook and they don't. And it's not right for me to cook and them not to cook without me giving them some of my food. And now I think we're beginning to get to some really good reasons for giving. You are compassionate for others who may not have either the ability to cook or may not have the food to cook with, and so you're giving it to others because it's not right in some sense. Now this is, again, I think we have to understand, probably intended to be a conceptual kind of understanding rather than a really visceral understanding. Now the seventh, what the Buddha says, is kind of interesting and one that we may disagree with, but nevertheless, I'll put it out there. He says that the seventh reason for giving, which is, again, the best of all of these, is to give to gain reputation. Now, I mean, from my point of view, I think it's better to give to somebody who doesn't have food because you think that they don't have food rather than to gain reputation. Nevertheless, that's what it says. That's the Buddha's reason. Maybe you can think of some better kind of reason for that than I can think of. But that one is still not the top one. The eighth reason, the top reason to give, is to give so as to ornament and equip the mind. Now, this is a very strange kind of idea. It sounds odd, I'll put it that way. To ornament and equip the mind. Now, the commentary says that what that really means is to ornament and equip the mind with serenity and insight. That is, that giving is a kind of meditative process. That giving is practice. And I think here we're getting, at the essence of the Buddha's teaching about giving. What's the inner reason for giving? That giving makes us better people. Giving is practice. And here I'll refer to a very interesting sentence from Joseph Goldstein's book, One Dharma, where Goldstein basically tries to look at the ways in which the various different strains of Buddhism all agree about some particular kind of teaching. And where he comes up with is that the essence of the Buddha Dharma is one thing. He says, the mind of non-grasping is the essential unifying experience of freedom. That is, what we're after in Buddhist practice is the mind of non-grasping. If we think of Buddhist practice as attempting to eradicate the three fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance, one of those fires is the fire of greed. The antidote to that is both renunciation and generosity, in particular generosity, or giving. So it is by giving, by expressing this kind of generosity, that we attempt to undo over time our own tendency towards greed, towards possession, towards the mind of grasping. And it's by doing that that we express our kindness for one another. It's by doing that, I think, that we reduce our own stress levels because we aren't trying to hold on with a kind of death grip to things that we possess. And by making the world a better place, we're acting in, I think, a wise and a contemplative way. In sum, there are many reasons for why we may give, and there in another sutta he talks about a few other ones, such as that my family is always given, so I will give, or that certain of my teachers say to give, so I give. or that I give because it causes me serenity and joy, that it makes me joyful to give. These are all reasons, and they're all, some of them better than others. But the top reason really has to do with giving being a kind of practice, giving being a method of equipping the mind with serenity and insight into the essential features of awakening, of freedom, which is a mind of non-grasping. So I'd be interested in your take on this. What do you think about these various reasons for giving? Do you find other ones in your own life? Do you agree with these? Do you think some of them are better than others in a way that the Buddha perhaps didn't explain very well? Or do you think that there's other things that could be said about to whom you should give? The Buddha doesn't talk a lot about giving to the poor as much as he talks about giving to people who are ethically pure. Which is not to say he doesn't say to do that, but he emphasizes ethics over everything. So I hope that that's been useful to you in illuminating what is really the basic teaching of Buddhism, the first teaching you would get if you were going to a talk by the Buddha for a lay audience. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for your kind comments and questions, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.